Back here on the program, Jones and Company, and today we speak with Sir Arthur Foulkes, a former Governor General of the Bahamas, former Member of Parliament, and he's been a number of former things, former Cabinet Minister as well, and the Honourable George A. Smith, a former Member of Parliament and former Cabinet Minister. In the first portion of our program, we dealt with our political development and political systems. Let's talk about how we have developed as a people over the last 45 years. And I mentioned at the break socially. How have we done? How are we doing in terms of our social development?
Not as well as we might. In fact, I am a little concerned about what I call our social culture. Well, let me preface that by saying this. We are doing extraordinarily well with our artistic culture. No question about that. I think we have, for the last 10, maybe even 20 years, we've been experiencing a veritable renaissance in Bahamian artistic expression. Paintings, music. Mr. Jones, you remember there was a time when our musicians used to imitate everything from America. Mm-hmm. Now we're producing beautiful Bahamian music. Mm-hmm. So our artistic culture is strong. Where we are falling down, I think, is our social culture. And by that I mean, I put it this way in a speech I made once, we tend to imitate the low end of other people's culture. And as you know, we are inundated with the low end of American culture. And as a result, I think our social culture is being cheapened and degraded. Now that's not to say that all of us have lost it, but when so many, when for instance, enough people stop saying yes sir and no ma'am, then you have a problem. You will always have people in your society who will not obey the norms of that society. But when it becomes widespread like that, then you need to worry. Mm-hmm. And I'm afraid, and I notice it in a number of things, even in our language. We are so quick to the Americans have, like I say, they have a low end and a high end. Got some highly qualified people who are doing wonders with the English language in America. On the other hand, you got on TV some people who are not doing that. For instance, I notice there's a trend now where we are abolishing what we call the uncounted noun. Most of us don't even remember the grammatical rules anymore. What that simply means is there are certain nouns that do not take the plural. The Americans seem now to have a campaign against that. So hence we get a thing. I saw a headline in the paper the other day: the futures of the rebels. Mm-hmm. The behaviors of the children, mm-hmm. the educations of the children. Mm-hmm. You can't divide education. It's education, Mm-hmm. And there's some other things like and pronunciation. When last you heard a Bahamian newscaster say route? Which route are we traveling?
Yes.
It's all route, because Americans say that.
Yes.
And that's a little example of how, that part of us.
It has to do with the Americanization of the Bahamian culture.
I mentioned to Ian Strong one time, when he was doing his production, I said, this is a good thing that you're doing, to have, so we could see Bahamians on the TV screen. Because the more of them we see, the more we are inclined to believe that we are them. And I think that is having not too good effect on us. And so there was I was told that there was a conference of the heads of government, and a Bahamian reporter, all these people, presidents, prime ministers, and this is how he begins his questions. Now, what are you guys?
Yeah. Yes.
You guys, president, prime minister?
Yes. Yes, I heard that happened in our cabinet office here with a young reporter.
Yeah.
That was very unfortunate.
And our manners, and when I say our manners, I mean our manners as we display it from day to day in ordinary course of our some social intercourse.
Poorly trained people.
No,
Yes?
I gave this example, the American thing. A young man walks into a classroom with a lady. He's a little tots. And he says, let's call her Jennifer Jones. He says, children, this is Jennifer Jones. And all the kids say, hi, Jennifer. What happened to Miss Jones?
Miss Jones, yeah.
See what I'm saying? And there was a time when Americans and foreigners were charmed by Bahamian manners, good manners.
But
And now we want to imitate them.
But Arthur, all of this begins in the home environment, right? Where family life is not what it used to be. Yes?
That's a part of it, yes. That's a part of it.
Well, what disturbs me, Wendell, is you go to these eateries, and the people who own the establishment bring in people to train the waiter and the waitresses how to carry the dish and how to walk with the hand on the side or at the back. And then they've got the waitress walking to a table where mature people are sitting. What you guys want? I told the owner of one of those establishments, I says, the same way you teach them how to place an order properly or to say what's on the menu, couldn't you teach them about good morning, sir, good evening, sir, how are you, ma'am? And today, like Sir Arthur said, the little kid believes it is right to call an adult by the first name. What is also very disturbing that for me personally, because I had an experience observing it, how quickly we write off categories of people. We have many, many young men and some women who are the product of single-parent homes. And they get into trouble. And in some cases, they are so overwhelmed by the efforts to have quick convictions. That's why when I used to hear this thing about swift justice, I said, no, that don't sound right to me. Because usually that means somebody is being taken advantage of just to get what we call justice. And the person who is denied their justice are in many cases these young, troubled young men. Chuago Lang, one of your colleagues on another station, was making the point that if we could rescue a portion of those young men, we will do a whole lot to reverse the downward trend in terms of certain activities. We could do a whole lot to reverse it downward so there's less such crimes. When I see a young woman being charged with possession of a dangerous weapon, and you later discover that her only problem was she likes a particular fella who took advantage of the fact that she's got a car, so he has her transporting his gun. Now, she's foolish, and she is guilty of having possession of. But the real criminal is a young man that convinced her to do that.
Yeah.
We've got to find a way in our society to address these problems and try to save some of these young people.
But there are people who would suggest that you gentlemen are from a different era. You, Mr. Smith, an elderly man now for some people. You're in your 70s, Arthur.
Yeah.
You're a 90-year-old man. They would say that you are just out of step and you're old-fashioned. How do we get our young people to understand that the value system that you grew up on, that you knew, that you held dear, this value system is still important today?
I would tell them to examine history, and they will find that all these things that we do in society, all the boundaries that we have established, the boundary between parent and child, the boundary between teacher and child, all these boundaries are important. All these rituals. Paul Adley gave me a quote many, many years ago. I can never remember exactly how it is, but it goes something like this. Because before you do away with any ritual or ceremony, examine what value it protects. So you go ahead, you could strip away the boundaries. You could say, well, that's old-fashioned. You could say, well, let's not dress to go to the House of Assembly. Let's go in T-shirts. Well, we don't need the judges to put on robes. We go in dungarees and so on. But you devalue everything when you do that, because these things protect. When the police force is drawn up in front of the Supreme Court at the opening of the assizes, at the opening of the court year, that sends a message to our people. Now people pick it up, you know. They look at the police, they're sharp, they drill. What do they see? You're not saying a word to them, but you're speaking to them through these rituals. They see discipline. They see a force that will defend us, that upholds the law. When the judges come with their robes, and they like that. And that speaks to them too. These men, these are serious people who are learned in the law. Praise the Lord, we have them to make judgments about us. So when you start stripping these things away, you will learn, as other societies have learned, it's not just about old and young. There are certain standards that a society has to keep, and it does away with them at its peril.
You both were elected members of Parliament in the 60s. Sir Arthur, 67 for you, 68 for you, Mr. Smith. And you've served our country well, served the government well. What have we become overall in terms of our political, social, economic development? Are you happy? Are you upbeat about the Bahamas?
Yeah, I'm upbeat, yes. I suppose I'm a confirmed optimist. I see the problems, but I also know that, as I said many times before, we have been, as a people, we've been through difficult periods before. To use a little poetic stuff here, we've crossed wider rivers and climbed higher mountains. And I have no doubt that the mere fact that we're talking about these things is the beginning of a way to address them. And we have a democracy, we have freedom of speech, and people like you, Mr. Jones, have done a great service by providing us the venue to do these things. These things are important, but it is through conversation, through dialogue that advances are made. The great advances in philosophy, all the great gifts that we have, the principles that we live by, all of those came as a result of conversations by Plato and Aristotle and Socrates, and then later on by other men and women. So this is a part of that leavening of our society.
But
we've done well in certain, one of the areas we've done, we talk about our failing schools, and I'd like to make this point if you don't mind. We have come a long, long way. There's no question about that. Despite the difficulties we have and the challenges, we've come a long way. When I used to go to school, Mr. Jones, we had to leave school at the age of 14. A handful of us were able to pass an examination to go to government high school every year. That's all. Just a handful, a few. A few every year from those hundreds of people. The rest, I left school at the age of 15 to go work at The Guardian. Today, we have thousands of Bahamians with bachelor's degrees and masters and doctorates. We got Rhodes Scholars. So we've made tremendous progress in a lot of areas. Let's not lose sight of that. We've done well, but we got to be self-critical, but don't be self-abusive.
Randall, let me tell you this, that if you look back through the pages of history, every successful society, every successful country during all those years, there was always reverence paid to people who were older, because embodied in them was years of knowledge and experience. Plato, they were all teachers. The same way when you were a little boy in Acklands, you looked up to the teacher because you knew he had something you needed to get. When we start to treat people who have made contribution to the country and treat them the way they ought to be treated. But I'd like to say that with all the problems we face in this society, I want you to bear with me while I give you two examples. In 1973, the population of the Bahamas was 181,490 people. The average life expectancy was 66.54 years, and the mortality rate stood at 6.2 deaths per 1,000. Our national debt was $109 million. The per capita income was $13,245, with unemployment at 8.5% of the total labor force. The population of the Bahamas now stands at 399,202. The average life expectancy is 76.1 years, and the mortality rate is 7.2 deaths per 1,000. The national debt presently stands at $7.2 billion, with a gross domestic product of $12.5 billion. The per capita income is $25,100, and unemployment now stands at 10.1% of a greatly expanded labor force of 220,000 people. Those people who thought that the Bahamas couldn't make it must now know that in the last 45 years we have conquered and overcome many obstacles. I think what we need to do in the Bahamas is to honestly admit what our problems are. Say to the political parties we require higher standards of our candidates, require a perhaps smaller cabinet, require that people who go to the Senate have the level of seniority so that they can be mentors to some of the less experienced members of the House. Use the tremendous reservoir of talent we have in this country, the brilliant professionals we have. You know, in Arthur family alone, you have a diverse number of people with so much experience, so much education. I talk to my daughter, for instance, and there isn't I come up with some foolish questions to ask about medicine, and she has a sensible answer for them. Mm-hmm. We have brilliance in this country. We've got Rhodes Scholars. We've got people who have been in the most celebrated universities in the world. We've got talent here. We have an excellent police force, excellent defense force. We've got in the public service some good people. We got in the private sector many, many good people who would wish to help the country. There isn't one problem, I think, that exists in this country that is beyond the capability of Bahamians to solve. And that's how well we're doing.
I agree.
But we move to a common, loftier goal. We need inspirational leadership for that, Sir Arthur, don't we?
We do, and that leadership has come from whoever has the capacity to give it. You know, the old people used to say, and I like what Mr. Smith just said, we have the capacity, we are talented people, Mr. Jones, you know that. We are talented way beyond our numbers. That's why the old people used to say, you know better, you're fit now. Mm-hmm. You know better. Yeah, exactly. Yes. So when you do wrong, you're fit. You could do better. It isn't like you're ignorant and stupid. You know better. So let's get our people to do better because they know better.
So we have done well, but we can do better.
We can do much better.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
On that note, we thank you so very much for being here today. I wish I had another hour because you provide tremendous food for thought. Thank you so very much.
Wendell, this country is blessed to see men like Sir Arthur who started at 15 to earn his first dollar, has seen this country and have seen the Bahamian people blossom from when they were regarded generally as nobodies to today, where anywhere in the world you travel and you ask those people if they heard about a place called the Bahamas, they'll probably say yes. Have you met any Bahamians? And they'll probably say yes. And they'll probably have some good things to say about us. We got to talk better about ourselves.
Thank you so very much.
Our great
Thank
pleasure.
you for being here today.
Our great pleasure.
Thank you for watching and listening to our program today, and we once again wish you happy independence and good evening, everyone.